Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SavvyCast. This is Jamie, and I'm thrilled that you are joining me today, whether you're viewing on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Okay, I'm very excited today to have as my guest, my son-in-law, Sean Hiller. Sean is married to my daughter, Ellie, who was actually on the podcast a week or two ago, and they have similar topics, but they are different. So what Sean, who is a physical therapist, I'm going to let him share his credentials. But the topic of today's conversation is something that I think is beneficial to all of us, regardless of age, stage of life, gender, or so forth. He will be speaking on the 3 archetypal movements that yield the biggest health ROI. So we're about to dig deep into that. But Sean, before we start, and I forgot to ask Ellie this. Oh my goodness, it's the icebreaker question. What would you choose as your last meal?
Oh man. Oh, probably the meal that you cook normally on January 1st every year. And it's the greens. I can't remember what greens they are, but it's the greens and those ribs that are
heavy back ribs.
Insane. Oh, those ribs are incredible. And there's something else that you normally put with that meal.
Black-eyed peas, ribs, greens, cornbread.
That cornbread. Oh man.
Mamie's blackberry cobbler.
That would probably be my last meal. Those ribs are incredible.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know that I've already impressed you enough with the food that you would choose it as your last meal. But
I'll look forward to it every year.
Yes. We skipped this year because the house was in disarray. But Sean, would you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell them what you do and how you fit into this world of health and fitness.
Absolutely. So I am a doctor of physical therapy. I also am a CSCS, which is Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist, and I have a lot of other certifications within that. So I've basically spent my career and honestly, majority of my life focusing on health, fitness, strength conditioning. How does the human body work? What makes it tick? How can we make it better? When the human body is injured, what do we need to do to take it from injured to healthy, and then from healthy to thriving? So as a physical therapist, my job is to take, if you consider the starting line, someone who's not injured and they're starting into healthcare, starting into health or fitness, wellness, all that stuff. My job is to take someone who's behind the starting line. They're injured. Mm-hmm. We've got to get them to the starting line so they can actually start to run the health and fitness race. So a lot of what I do is very, very fitness, wellness, strength conditioning based, but for injured individuals, getting them to a healthy state so they can pursue health and fitness along the way. And I've spent, like I've said, most of my life training individuals from 10 years old to 90 years old, training groups of people, teams, a lot of different folks. I've been exposed to several different areas of health and fitness, and to the point to where we think we're always learning new stuff. And we consider that health and fitness is someone's first step into healthcare. So your first step into healthcare shouldn't be into a doctor's office. It shouldn't be into maybe a surgical office. It should be into maybe your basement that has a kettlebell, or into your Planet Fitness, or into a gym. That should be your first step into healthcare, because that is the baseline of healthcare, is strength conditioning, health and fitness. So
because nobody really wants to have to see you, because it means there's a problem. So so you're really trying to teach us, everyone, how to not have to see you.
Exactly.
Or have to see a doctor.
Yeah. How do you live a healthy enough life to when you do have to see me? If you do, because things are going to happen. You can live as perfectly as possible. Yeah. Things are still going to happen. But when you do have to see me, your body is prepped and ready to receive what we're going to go through. So you're going to be able to knock it out of the park and not have to deal with it for the rest of your life. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to take off all the chronic illness and let us deal with the acute, the more temporary issues.
Got it. Okay. Because in other words, you're given different types of Play-Doh to work with every time a client walks in your office. So you're going to teach us how to be the best Play-Doh ever. So we get in and get out as quickly with the best results the most quickly.
Yep. I want the most resilient Play-Doh we can have. And that is basically, if you are doing these principles we're going to talk about today, you are increasing your resilience measure of your body to where when something happens, you're resilient to it. So as opposed to if you're not practicing any of these things and something happens, your outcomes are going to be much worse. If you are practicing these little nuggets we're going to talk about, it's not going to be as detrimental to your body and you'll be able to overcome it much quicker.
Okay. Okay. Well, Sean, let's just start. So you said you're going to talk about 3 archetypal movements that yield the biggest health ROI. Ellie talked about the 10 nutrition choices or routines that yield the biggest ROI. First of all, explain what an archetypal movement is. You're talking about 3. How many are there, and what is archetypal?
Yeah, and this can be totally debatable how many there are, but traditionally we view it as having 7 archetypal movements. And an archetypal movement is essentially a type of movement. So the 3 we're going to talk about today is the squat, the hinge or the deadlift, and the overhead press or the press in general. There's other ones to go along with that, but these are just basically boxes that you can place every other movement into. So we're going to talk about what makes those boxes so important for our movement today. And hopefully a little bit we'll be able to get into how do you actually train those boxes within an energy system. Like, should you train them aerobically? Should you train them for power, strength? How should you actually train those? And the answer is a mix of it. But an archetypal movement is a type of movement that we can throw everything into.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, let's start with the first one.
Okay, so I believe the fundamental, most foundational movement that everyone needs to be able to do and everyone needs to train first and foremost is the hinge, or otherwise known as the deadlift. The reason I say this is because if you go to the store, if you go anywhere, the number one thing you're going to see people needing to do is bend over and pick something up.
Especially those water, the big 24 water. Let me just say this, Sean, and this won't surprise you. One of my dear friends, and I think she's younger than I am, ran into her, hadn't seen her in a while. She broke her back lifting up water to move it to another room, the cases of bottled water. And she's younger than I am. She said, I have been in physical therapy. It's horrible. So is that what you're speaking of, a hinge?
Yes. I hate that. And you speak to something really important here is everybody comes into life with a different genetic predisposition. We all have gifts. Some of us are born really strong. Some of us aren't. But training these things are going to, again, build those resilience levels to when you go to pick up that big, heavy case of water. You've been training that movement. Your body's resilient to the threat of picking this case of water up so you can sustain it. That's the funny thing. Exercise, the body interprets any type of exercise as a literal threat to your health. It's a threat to the body. So the adaptations that your body undergoes is it's responding to a threat. And to respond to the threat, it has to add strength. It has to build spinal strength. It just responds so well to when we threaten ourselves. Just like if you take a runner to improve their running capacity, they're going to run more. They're going to try to run faster than they did before. It's going to fatigue them more, but the body responds to that threat by making your heart healthier than what it was. So that's all exercise. Exercise is a threat on the body, and our body adapts to the threat. So with the first one being a deadlift, what if you are able to train a deadlift, train a hinge movement? And you could literally, if I had to pick one movement to ever train, it would be this one, because you're teaching motor control of the spine. And there's a very, very precious piece of anatomy that runs through the middle of the spine. And that's called the spinal cord. And we all know what happens when you injure your spinal cord. Bad things happen. We don't want that to happen. If you're able to train your body, your core, to control your vertebral movement, you're going to really get a lot of benefit out of that when you go to pick up something heavy, or really when you do anything, when you're sleeping at night. Your body has more stability to where when you wake up in the morning, you don't feel like you just got hit by a truck, because you have more spinal stability. It is the core foundational movement because it teaches us, how do we brace? How do I create a bridge? And this is what you need to view. If you look at somebody's core, you can see those beautiful 6-pack, 8-packs, whatever. It's not about that. The core of your body is meant to be a bridge. And imagine a car driving across a bridge. Now imagine a bridge that's swaying and moving a ton. A car can't drive across that bridge. A deadlift is a beautiful way to learn how to transmit force from my hips through my core, through the bridge, to my arms. And that's what a deadlift is. And that's why it's so vitally important.
Okay. And I know that there are many people watching or listening who have gym memberships or have personal trainers.
Mhm.
I know what these are. I do kettlebell deadlifts. I mean, my trainer says that. Then I do barbell deadlifts. So I know what it is. But what about someone who maybe is just now dipping their toe into the water? They don't have a gym membership. Is this something they could do at home? Or would you say, hey, just get the best price, the least expensive gym membership and learn how to do it?
Yeah.
It is so important.
Yes, I think this is incredibly important. I think as a person, you have to identify, what kind of person are you, what motivates you. If you're somebody who can walk into your garage and do things alone, then hats off to you. That's not me. I need accountability. I need somebody there. And that's really what you get when you get into a group setting, or if you have a personal trainer, you get accountability. And hopefully, especially if you have a personal trainer, you've found someone who actually knows what they're talking about and they can help you and you have a good one. But this is something that anybody can do. The funny thing, you can literally go out to Target, wherever you want to get, and get some dumbbells, get some kettlebells. It doesn't have to be super heavy. And you want to start light. You don't want to start super heavy, but you can go out to your garage and you can start deadlifting. It's not that hard. And we freak out about form a ton. Everybody's like, oh, if I don't deadlift this with perfect form, then I'm going to put my body at risk. That's kind of true, but the most important thing is starting. It's better for you to deadlift something or to start training this movement with poor form than it is not to do it at all. That would be the biggest thing there. But of course, it's always good to have someone there to help you. So if you did start in your garage, just picking things up, it could be as simple as, hey, I'm going to YouTube how to do a proper deadlift. And odds are whoever you find is going to get you somewhere in the correct ballpark. But the gold standard would obviously be go to a gym, find a good trainer or find a good group fitness class and have them show you the basics of it. And
then you can know what you're doing if you want to say quit the gym membership and work at home. But I'm like you, I have to have accountability. But so can you get someone at your work to film you doing these three, and we'll put them in the show notes. We'll put little links where people watching and listening can see how you think it should be done.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. I'll do it.
So deadlift. Okay. So what is number 2?
Number 2 is the squat. So if the deadlift teaches us how to brace our core when we go to move something, and by the way, this is just a quick tidbit. Everybody always asks me, what do I need to do to get abs? What do I need to do to actually make a more aesthetically pleasing core and all this stuff? The truth of it is cardio is only going to take you so far. Cardio is only going to be able to burn the fat on top of the muscle. If you don't have the muscle, there's not going to be no aesthetically pleasing thing there. It's deadlifting and squatting literally are what cause, the aesthetics to happen, because you're bracing your core and you're functionally doing it. That's the thing. All of these movements we're talking about today pertain to things you do in everyday life. So to the squat, the number one issue that older adults have when they pass the age of, say, 70, 75 is standing up from a chair. That is a squat. We literally go through all these different cues to try to help them and teach them how to stand up from a chair. Our bodies, if we're not using it, if you don't use it, you lose it. That's such a true phrase. From the age of 35 on, men lose about 10% of their type 2 power fibers every year. Women, after they hit menopause, they lose those type 2 fibers by 25 to 30% or more per year.
Oh, goodness.
Only if you're not training it. If you train it, this is the crazy thing. If you actually train it, you only lose 1 to maybe 3% per year. You can keep a lot of those gains. Resistance training really curves the aging line. It makes you stay young. It makes you youthful. But squatting in that regard. So if deadlifting teaches how to brace the core, squatting teaches us how to brace the core while we move our hips through space. I'm standing up from that chair. I'm squatting down in the grocery store to get to that case of water. I'm doing something where my hips are moving through a full range of motion while my body's braced. Now I do want to say a few caveats on this is people ask a lot, should I squat below parallel? Should my hips drop below my knees? That's a big one, because they're worried about their knee health. They're worried, is this actually healthy for my knees to move over my toes? It's a big debate in strength and conditioning. And the truth is, you need to squat to a full range of motion. And that means you need to squat as low as you possibly can. There's actually less force on the knee below parallel than there is at parallel. There's way more force on the knee at parallel. Plus, the body is it's very much like a car engine in the fact that we require lubricant to move. So for the knees, for example, there's a lubricant in the knees in every joint called synovial fluid, and synovial fluid is 99.9% water. So this kind of gets you on the loop. If you're dehydrated, every one of your joints is going to have more friction in it. It's not going to move as well. You're going to feel more pain. We have people come in all the time who have 7, 8 out of 10 pain. They drink no water. All of a sudden we get them to drink just a little bit of water and they feel better. Their pain starts to go away because they're actually hydrated. They have oil in the engine to lubricate the joints. But the other part of that is if you only ever squat to parallel, you're not lubricating the areas of your knees, your hips that require you to go to a full depth. So maybe one day you're in the grocery store and you have to squat down to full depth, but you never do it. You're moving into areas that have no lubrication. You're moving into areas that are really high friction areas, and you're more likely to tweak one of those areas than you would be if you were training that movement. So you always want to train the full depth movement really to lubricate your joints and to strengthen those joints in their full range. And that's why the squat is so beneficial, because it takes knees, ankles, hips through a full range of motion and builds strength in those ranges of motion. That's why it's so important.
Okay. And I know because I have used the equipment at our club, like our little country club over here.
Yeah.
And then I've also done what I'm doing now, Iron Tribe. It's a lot easier when you've got a machine and you've got holding the bar and you've got than what you have to do, or even visiting you. If you have a gym membership and there is the equipment there, I know it's probably not the best, but is it effective?
Yeah. So let me say this: simplicity, and this is the wonderful thing about strength conditioning. It really is better to be more simple. So you can have a lot of fancy equipment, and I'm saying this is a very general statement. There's some really good fancy equipment out there that can take you a long ways, but the relationship you're making right now is a Smith machine versus like a free barbell. So a barbell or dumbbells or kettlebells that aren't connected to anything, that's what we call free weight, versus a Smith machine. And a lot of you guys have probably seen this, to where the bar is actually hooked to something and it can only move up and down. It can't move out of the way. So when you have a machine that's set up like that, what it's really taking out of the equation is your core. Because when you have free weights, when you're working with free weights, it's all on your core to stabilize those weights, because they're trying to move all around you. Whereas a Smith machine, you're just going up and down. Your core doesn't have to do as much work.
Oh goodness, that's why it's easier.
It's a lot easier. Yeah. Because all of a sudden, your hips can just focus on just driving the weight, but your core doesn't have to do anything. So it's not as good for core health. And I would definitely say it's because how many times in life do you have to squat something that's connected to something that goes up and down?
Yeah.
It's not very functional. It doesn't turn over as well to that grocery store encounter or any other encounter you'll have in life.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. Okay. Number 3.
Yeah. Number 3 is pressing. So in particular, overhead pressing. All right. So that really covers, those 3 movements really cover the full range of human movement. So we have a deadlift where we're taking something from the ground. We have a squats where we have something in our hands and we're sitting down, or we're placing it on the ground, or we're standing back up from something. And then we have a press, and that's when you're reaching overhead. In all of these movements, there's a ton of different variations of these movements, but these are the general 3 that you need to train a variation of each 3 of those movements. The press is so important because it trains not only, so you have the bracing component from the deadlift, you have to brace your core to press anything overhead. It'd be the same thing as you wouldn't be able to stand up on a surface that's made of water, right? Unless you're Peter and you're getting out of the boat and you're looking at Christ the whole time. As soon as you look away, you start to sink. So we're not talking about that. But if you're standing on a very unstable surface, you can't press from it. It's the same thing as pressing. If I have a very unstable core, I can't press from it. It's like trying to press from water. But if I have a solid core, all of a sudden I'm standing on concrete and I can press overhead. Also, the overhead press teaches a full range of motion for the thoracic and the cervical spine. So you maybe see some of these older adults, or people in general, who have this kyphotic look. They have this humped over look. A lot of that, we have these people come into the clinic all the time. The way we train this is by pressing. Because if I'm in this kyphotic posture, when I press overhead, it forces me out of kyphosis and into extension. And that's really
So that humped over look in old age can be fixed.
Absolutely. We have
Wow.
have a gentleman right now who, when we started, he had basically I'd have him lean against the wall, and I would ask him to put the back of his head on the wall. Okay. When we first start, and that's not doing this, it's more like retraction. You should be able to stand against the wall and put the back of your head against the wall without looking up. He was 18 inches away from the wall. That's how far he was. He could not get his head close at all. So all of a sudden we started training a ton of overhead movements. We trained them for probably 2 or 3 months. And our last measurement, which was a few weeks ago, he's about 11 inches from the wall. So we've had a 7-inch improvement, and he's just continued to show improvement. And the way we do that is through overhead strength or overhead movement. And also from a cervical perspective, a full end range of motion overhead, you're really showing the full motion of cervical movement. This is the movement that you're doing, and this is really what produces health. The cervical movement, doing movements like this, is required. You want to have it, but really the bread and butter of training it is really this retraction, protraction type movement. It's a gliding and a sliding of the joints. And that's what an overhead press really teaches us. So we've got thoracic spine, the cervical spine, and then we've got the shoulders that are so correlated to the thoracic spine and your scapula. People don't realize this. When you press overhead, your scapula have to wrap around your body, almost to the very front side of your body here. If they're not doing that, then you're going to get stuck here. You're not going to be able to go all the way overhead and get the head through. So training a press, similar to a squat or a deadlift, trains those joints, those areas of the body within a full range of motion. And if you're able to add strength to it, add load to it, the more load you're able to add to these movements, basically the more resilience you're building in a full range of motion movement.
Wow, that's amazing. So like the gentleman that you're working with who's humped over, but he's making progress. If we all do these 3 things before we get to that point, we won't ever have to be undoing what he's having to undo.
Absolutely.
It's neglect of doing these things that leads us to having to come see you for that type of thing.
Exactly. The first thing that is working against you or for you is your genetic predisposition. He has such a significant kyphosis. He likely had a genetic predisposition to having a kyphosis. There's a ton of things we can do to combat those genetics. Genetics is the number 1 factor, but how you train is really the number 2 factor. It's the only way you have of combating that. I have a story that I like to tell with this. We have a friend who was very, very fit, extremely fit. He was, just very cut up, shredded, lived a very healthy lifestyle, ate extremely well. But he was genetically predisposed to cardiac conditions. He had a stroke. I'm sorry, he had it was a nervous system condition. So he had I'm not sure if it was a stroke or a heart attack, that's a while back, but he had a stroke. And he went to the hospital for it. He was literally in a coma for a day, and he came out of that, and all of a sudden he had no symptoms. And ever since then he has had 0 symptoms. And I can't help but think, if he didn't live a healthy lifestyle, if he ate poorly, if he was significantly overweight, which he's not at all, I just wonder if that stroke would have had a lot more detrimental outcome than it did. Because right now he has 0 symptoms from it. He has no issues, which is incredible. So I can't help but wonder. And that's his resilience levels were so high that when something happened, his body was able to take it in and get rid of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, this is very, very motivating to me, and I'm sure to everyone who's hearing all of this. So Sean, thank you for agreeing to first share all this. Secondly, to do a demonstration. You can get Ellie. One of y'all can film the other. And if you don't mind, write down or make a list of links of just the basic equipment, like whether it's 10-pound weights or 20 or just any of that, so that anyone who is like, oh my goodness, I've got to start doing this, they'll have everything they need. They'll know how to do it and what they need to do it. So thank you for agreeing to do that. And is there anything else you would like to add to this before we segue off?
The only thing I would say is that a lot of times people are intimidated to train this way, and they're a little bit afraid to train this way. And I totally get it, because the atmospheres that have been painted to actually train these movements are more rugged atmospheres. They're not, some of the gyms that do these things are a little bit more rugged. Not all of them are, but some of them are. It can be intimidating to try to do these movements, but it's so worth it. If you start doing these things now, you're going to be able to avoid unnecessary surgeries. You're going to be able to avoid unnecessary health risk. By doing these things, you're literally strengthening yourself to when you're 60, 70, 80 years old. You're not worried about picking your grandkid up. You're able to do it. The thing about this, we don't know if training like this increases your life, like increases the longevity of your life. But we know, we've got research to back it, it increases the quality of your life. Instead of having to, in your later ages, instead of having to have help just to go up your stairs, you're pretty much able to live a very high quality of life. And then when it's time to die, you can die with dignity. You don't have to die. We're going through a lot of the horrible things that a lot of our, grandparents, parents have to go through. And that's what we're all trying to do. We don't want to be a burden to our kids. We don't want to be a burden to the people around us. We just want to be able to live the lives we want to live. And this is what these different things empower you to do. So I would encourage anybody who's a little worried about doing this to say, I've got to do it. This is for myself. And it's not only for myself, it's for the people who may have to take care of me down the road. It's important for everybody to do.
Oh my goodness. Well, Sean, this is gold. This is so helpful. I so appreciate it. And maybe another time when you can jump on, we can do some of the other archetypal movements, but you've given us the most important and we'll work on those. And then again, everyone watching or listening, show notes, we'll have all of this. They'll have the demonstration of how to do these 3 movements, as well as any basic equipment that you might need, where no matter where you are, what your situation, you'll be able to get the biggest ROI. So Sean, thank you. Thank you so very much. I'm always grateful when you jump on.
I love it. I love the SavvyCast. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. You have a great rest of your day.
You too.